And something to note about this one is that even though it's just labeled as a second edition, there has been quite significant changes to the game, especially the artwork, because it looks a lot better now, but they have tweaked the rules a little bit to make it a little bit more streamlined and really focus on the simultaneous play. And I do think this game looks like a lot of fun as well, which is great because it's definitely a travel-friendly game, because the way that this game works is that it just uses a deck of cards. These cards are going to be in 5 different colors, with only 3 of those colors actually gaining you victory points at the end of the game, and the other 2 subtracting from your victory points. But what's really cool about this is that it's the cards in the center of the table at the end of the game that are going to be determining which of these colors score and which don't, and the players do have some control over this. There is one special card in this game called the tiebreak card, and this one is super important because it's going to determine which of the colored cards take priority over others in the case of a tie at the end of the game. And I'll come back to the final scoring in a second here, but at the start of the game, you're going to be putting that tiebreak card out on the table for all to see, and then you're also going to be randomly drawing 3 cards from the main deck, and then putting those cards in order according to the tiebreak card, stacking any cards that might happen to be the same color. This is really nice because it adds a little bit of variety from game to game, since the colors that appear there at the start of the game are going to be a little bit more likely to be the cards that end up scoring at the end of the game. This is a game that plays over a series of rounds, and the rules to this one are quite simple because each round you're just going to be dealing 3 cards to each player, and then each player is going to simultaneously choose 1 card to keep face down in front of them, then they're going to pass the remaining cards to the player on their left. This repeats with players choosing another card, but then the card that was not selected is actually going to be going into the center of the table, adding to the stacks that were already there at the start of the game. This means that new colors could be added into this display, or more cards could be added to those existing colors. But the game just continues like this over a series of rounds until that main deck is completely depleted, and then you're going to be adding up each of the columns for each colored card, and then the columns that have the highest total value are going to be the ones that actually gain you points at the end of the game, with the columns of the lowest values subtracting from your victory points. And this is where that tiebreak card becomes really important, because once you've added up the cards for each column, if you have total values that equal each other for 1 or more columns, you're going to be falling back to the tiebreak card to determine which ones take priority, and this could be the deciding factor of gaining points or losing points for a particular column. But now that you know which of the colors are going to be gaining or losing you points, all the players are going to be revealing the cards that they kept face down in front of them, and then adding or subtracting the values of those cards depending on which color they are. The player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And like I said, I do think this one does look like a ton of fun, because the decision of which cards you want to pass is super important and does also grant you with some additional information, because you know which cards you passed, and you might want 1 or both of those cards to end up in the center of the table because they might be a color that you're collecting, but the card that isn't sent to the center of the table, you then know was kept by your opponent, and you know which cards they might be going for. This is going to create some really interesting decisions with the cards that you actually decide to keep, since you also want to keep cards that are hopefully going to be granting you points at the end of the game. I'm really loving the design on this one, and I think the upgraded artwork really does go a long way, and it's much better than what they had in the previous edition. So if you are interested in this one like I am, definitely follow along with the campaign, and you can find a link to it in the description below.